What Gideon's Promise does an amazing job of successfully doing is bringing together a room full of people that know why you're feeling the way you're feeling without you having to explain why. And what that allows is a level of discourse and connection and empathy that you can't get to without a certain amount of background and explanation with even the most supportive of family members or community members. There is an inextricable bond.
Welcome to the Black Enterprise Principled Entrepreneurship Series, sponsored by Koch Industries. In our series, we profile individuals and organizations that use innovation to advance organizations and our communities. Today, we talk with Ilham Askia, Executive Director of Gideon's Promise, a game changer in terms of transforming the culture of the criminal justice system. Welcome, Ilham.
Thank you, thank you.
We want to start with Gideon's Promise and its mission. You know, the focus is to transform the culture of the criminal justice system. How does Gideon's Promise go about that mission?
So right now, the criminal justice system really has a culture of processing people through. So people are accused of crimes, they're assigned a public defender, and then it is the meet 'em and plead 'em and get them through the system turnstile, going to prison. And so we have basically grown up in this country where processing people and numbers is the name of the game. And so instead of allowing people to actually get their constitutional right to have a good quality public defender. So the culture is not indicative of what the Constitution says. So Gideon's Promise works with public defenders.
You made an intentional decision to have a concentration for Gideon's Promise to be concentrated in the South. Is that because these practices are more prevalent in the South than in the West, the Northeast, and other areas of the country?
It's the heaviest concentration of violations are happening in the South. So there are still jurisdictions across the country, especially when you see in smaller rural communities throughout the country, in the Midwest and the West. You even see it in urban areas, in New York City, in Chicago, LA. But the heaviest concentration of this culture shift, this need for culture shift, is here in the South.
Your work is very personal to you. Your family has been involved with the criminal justice system. Please share us that history and the impact that it's had on you and how it inspired you to, be so passionate about what you're doing today.
So almost every man in my family has been in the system, whether it's jail or prison. And it's very personal to me because when I was 5, my father was arrested and convicted and sent to Attica Correctional Facility, which is one of the worst state prisons in the country and definitely in the state of New York. And when I was a little girl, I didn't really understand why, but I spent most of my childhood visiting him in Attica. And as I grew older, I learned that he had a public defender. We came from very humble beginnings. We couldn't afford a private defense attorney, and a public defender was assigned. And that public defender never told the story of how taking the head of our household out. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. She was pregnant with my brother. There are 4 of us, and never told the story of impact. Not that my father was necessarily innocent of everything he was accused of, but he at least deserved to have an advocate on his side to tell the story.
And your story is not uncommon to other stories.
Correct.
What does Gideon's Promise do to ensure that public defenders spend the time?
So in order to change the culture of public defense, of the criminal justice system, you have to change hearts and minds. And so our organization is built on a set of core values. The client is first, excellence, building humanity, visualizing humanity. And so for us, everything with our values-based approach is teaching our lawyers, number one, that there are variables that you cannot control. right now. You cannot control your caseload. On average, the lawyers we work with have 250 cases a year. That's 250 human lives.
What can our audience members, our audience of professionals, executives, entrepreneurs, entrepreneur and professional aspirants do to advance the mission of Gideon's Promise?
If we don't invest in public defenders, we're not investing in people. So that's the biggest thing that I ask people who are in the business community to think about, or even question. How come no one's talking about defense counsel? I've sat in audiences of a lot of criminal justice reform conferences, and the public defender representation is often absent. Sometimes I get asked, I'm not a lawyer. I just work with lawyers. And I appreciate being asked, but a lot of times we've had to insert ourselves in the conversation. And so that's the one thing, is just ask the question, well, who's representing the people who are coming through the system?
You have the law school program and on one end, and I'm sure you have recruitment of young people coming into Gideon's Promise. How do you ensure they're looking at this as potentially their life's work?
We ask questions. We interview everyone who comes in the pipeline as a summer law clerk, all the way into the law school partnership to core, our core 101. We interview. They write essays and application. It is a different type of lawyer. I can't stress. It is being a social worker, a healthcare provider, a therapist, and a lawyer.
As you look at the future, how do you continue to replicate that branding, if you will, for Gideon's Promise on a national scale?
I truly believe in the family dynamic of Gideon's Promise. I think succession planning is critical. We're at this stage in our organization. The growth is an issue. I say it's a good problem to have. But really, one of our biggest goals is to groom the next generation of public defender leaders. So those new lawyers that come in, we tell them, not all of you are going to be the leaders of an office, but we want you to stay long term. And so in order to grow exponentially is if you can keep them there long enough to be the leader in the office, to take that culture and groom the next generations that come after them. That's how we're able to sustain.
Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you'd like to share with our audience?
About a year ago, I was feeling tired, worn out, thinking about doing something else. Nonprofit work in the criminal justice space is extremely hard. Our public defenders work hard. We work hard to try to support them. And I had to pick my 8-year-old up from school, and I brought him here. And there's a little corner deli around the corner from the office, and he said, "Mom, I just want a sandwich." So I go over there, and he spilled something. So a guy comes behind the counter. He was flipping burgers. He helps wipe down, and he says to Lucas, my son, "Hey, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And Lucas said, "I want to be a public defender." And so when my children say that, I'm ready for the negative reaction that most people give us. Why would you want to do that? How can you represent those people? So I'm embracing myself for it and also trying to be protective. And the guy says, "That's great." He said, "You know what? I had a public defender once. And I had been in trouble a lot my whole life. And it was the first time that a public defender actually fought for me, and we won. And I didn't go because I didn't do that crime. It was the first time I didn't do something. And without that public defender, I wouldn't be here." So I just asked, I said, where did this happen? He said, "Here in Georgia." And his public defender was Sean Hoover, who was a lawyer we had just trained the year before.
Well, Ilham, thanks for sharing that story and the journey of Gideon's Promise and the promise of Gideon's Promise. Thank you for being a part of this interview.
Thank you.